My youngest son sold my farm worth $34 million without my permission. When I threatened to sue him, he handed me $10,000 and shouted, "Get out of here and be happy with this tip, useless old man." The surprise came on Monday with a call from my lawyer. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. I never thought my own son would be the one to destroy everything I had spent 40 years building. But there I was, standing in my kitchen at 60 years old, staring at a stack of papers that felt heavier than the world itself. The morning had started like any other. I was making my usual cup of coffee, watching the sunrise paint the rolling hills of my ranch in golden light. 300 acres of prime Texas land that my late husband Robert and I had purchased when Trevor was just a baby. We had scraped together every penny, worked 16-hour days, and built something that would last for generations. The knock on my door came at 8:30 sharp. I wasn't expecting anyone, but living on a ranch, unexpected visitors weren't unusual. What I didn't expect was to find a stranger in an expensive suit holding a briefcase. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm David Chen from Preston Real Estate Holdings. I wanted to personally thank you for the smooth transaction. The new owners are thrilled with their purchase." My coffee mug slipped from my hands, shattering on the porch. "I'm sorry, what transaction?" He looked confused, then concerned. "The sale of your property, ma'am. We completed the purchase last Friday. $34 million. Your son Trevor handled everything beautifully." The world tilted. I gripped the doorframe to keep from falling. "There's been a mistake. I never sold my ranch." Mr. Chen's face went pale. He fumbled through his briefcase, pulling out document after document. My signature was on every page, but I had never seen these papers before in my life. "Ma'am, your son assured us you were aware of the sale. He had full power of attorney and showed us your signed consent forms." Power of attorney. The words hit me like a physical blow. 2 years ago, when I had pneumonia and was hospitalized for a week, Trevor had convinced me to sign some papers just in case something happened. I had trusted him completely. He was my baby, my youngest son, who had always been so attentive, so caring. After Mr. Chen left, promising to look into the matter, I sat on my porch swing with shaking hands and called Trevor. He answered on the third ring, his voice cheerful and casual. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" "Trevor, I just had a very interesting conversation with someone from Preston Real Estate Holdings." The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard him sigh, not with regret, but with annoyance. "Mom, we need to talk. I'll be over in 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. I paced through my house, touching the furniture Robert and I had chosen together, looking at family photos spanning decades. This wasn't just a house or a business. This was our life, our legacy, our children's inheritance. When Trevor's BMW pulled into my driveway, I watched through the window as he sat in his car for several minutes, talking on his phone. He was 35 years old, successful in his own right, as a marketing executive in Dallas, or so I thought. He walked in without knocking, something that had always bothered me, but I had never corrected. Today, it felt like a violation. "Mom, sit down. We need to have a serious conversation." I remained standing. "About how you sold my ranch without telling me?" He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I recognized from his childhood when he was caught doing something wrong. But there was no shame in his expression now, only irritation. "Look, Mom, you're 60 years old. This place is too much for you. You can't handle the upkeep, the finances, the decisions that need to be made every day. I've been handling it just fine for the past 5 years since your father died." "Have you?" His voice turned sharp. "Mom, you forgot to pay the property taxes last year. I had to cover them. You nearly let the water rights lapse. The insurance was 3 months behind." I felt my cheeks burn. I was dealing with grief, Trevor, and you never told me you paid those things. You could have reminded me instead of just taking over. He shook his head like I was being unreasonable. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're not thinking clearly. Sarah and I have been worried about you for months." Sarah, my oldest daughter. The thought that she knew about this made my chest tighten. "So you decided to sell my home without discussing it with me first?" I tried to discuss it. Every time I brought up selling, you got emotional and refused to listen. So I made the decision that was best for everyone. The casual way he said it, like he was discussing the weather, made my hands clench into fists. Best for everyone? Trevor, where am I supposed to live? He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. That's why I'm here. Inside was a check for $10,000. I stared at it, then at my son's face. He looked pleased with himself, like he was being generous. $10,000? My voice came out as a whisper. It's enough for a down payment on a nice little apartment in town, maybe one of those senior living communities with activities and people your own age. I felt something break inside me, not just my heart, but something deeper. The image I had held of my son, of my family, of my place in their lives. Trevor, this ranch is worth $34 million. You just gave me $10,000 and expect me to be grateful? His expression hardened. Mom, you didn't earn that money. Dad did, and he's been dead for 5 years. It's time for the living to make practical decisions. I worked this land right beside your father for 35 years. I earned every acre. You cooked meals and kept house. That's not the same thing. The dismissal in his voice was like a slap. I had branded cattle, fixed fences, negotiated with buyers, managed the books. I had done everything Robert had done, often while pregnant or caring for small children. Get out. Mom, don't be dramatic. Take the money and go find yourself a nice place to live. You'll be happier, trust me. Get out of my house. He stood up, straightening his suit jacket. Fine. But when you calm down and think about this rationally, you'll realize I did you a favor. This place was becoming a burden you couldn't handle. He walked toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and Mom, the new owners take possession next Friday. You'll need to be out by then. The sound of his car driving away echoed across the hills that were no longer mine. I sat in the silence of my empty house and wondered how the son I had raised, the boy I had read bedtime stories to and comforted through nightmares, had become a stranger capable of such cruelty. That night I called my daughter Sarah, hoping for support, for someone to tell me this was all a terrible misunderstanding. But when she answered, her voice was cold and distant. Mom, Trevor told me you two talked. I think you need to accept that this is for the best. The phone call with Sarah felt like drowning in slow motion. My daughter, the one who used to braid my hair and tell me she wanted to be just like me when she grew up, was speaking to me like I was a confused child who needed to be managed. Sarah, honey, your brother sold my ranch, our family ranch. Don't you understand what that means? There was a pause, then a sigh that sounded exactly like Trevor's earlier that day. Mom, we've all been talking about this for months. The ranch is too much responsibility for you. All been talking? Who is all? Trevor, me, Marcus, and even the grandkids. We're worried about you living out there alone. What if something happens? What if you fall and no one finds you for days? Marcus, my middle son, the one who had always been the peacemaker in our family. If he was part of this, then I truly had no allies left. Sarah, I'm 60 years old, not 90. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. Are you, though? Her voice took on that patronizing tone I'd heard Trevor use. Mom, you called me 3 weeks ago, asking where you put Dad's insurance papers. They were in the same filing cabinet they've been in for 20 years. The grief I felt in that moment was different from losing Robert. When he died, I mourned a future we would never have together. This felt like mourning a past that apparently never existed. Had my children always seen me as incompetent? Had they been waiting for an opportunity to take control of my life? Forgetting where I put some papers doesn't mean I'm incapable of making decisions about my own property. Mom, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Trevor found you a beautiful senior community in town. You'll have people to talk to, activities, medical care nearby if you need it. I don't want to live in a senior community. I want to live in my home. Laura, that's not your home anymore, Mom. The finality in her voice made my stomach turn. I hung up without saying goodbye. An hour later, Marcus called. Part of me hoped he would be different, that he would understand how devastating this was for me. Marcus had always been sensitive, the one who worried about everyone's feelings. Mom, Sarah told me you're upset about the ranch. Upset? Marcus, your brother stole my home and sold it without my permission. Upset doesn't begin to cover it. Well, he didn't steal it, Mom. He had power of attorney. You signed those papers yourself. For medical emergencies, not to sell my property. Mom, listen to me. Trevor showed us the financial situation. The ranch is bleeding money. The property taxes alone are crushing you. He saved you from bankruptcy. I felt like I was in an alternate universe where black was white and up was down. Marcus, the ranch is profitable. We made $600,000 last year alone. From what? You haven't run cattle in 2 years? You're not growing anything. You're just paying bills and watching the money drain away. He was wrong, but the confidence in his voice made me doubt myself for a moment. Had I been managing things as well as I thought? No. I knew my own finances. I had spreadsheets, bank statements, tax returns. The ranch was doing fine. Marcus, will you at least come look at my books? Let me show you the real numbers? Mom, I trust Trevor's judgment on this. He's always been good with money, and he's been helping you more than you realize. Helping me. Everyone kept using that word, but it felt more like they had been plotting against me. What about the fact that I have nowhere to live now? You have options. Trevor gave you money for a new place, and if you need more, we can all chip in. But Mom, you have to understand that keeping you in that big house on all that land just isn't practical anymore. After he hung up, I sat in my living room surrounded by 40 years of memories and felt more alone than I had even after Robert's death. At least then, I had known my children loved me and would support me through my grief. The next morning, I decided to call my youngest daughter, Jennifer. She lived in California with her husband and 2 teenage sons. Maybe distance had given her perspective the others lacked. Mom, I was just thinking about you. How are you doing? For a moment, I thought I had found an ally. Then I realized she didn't know yet. Jennifer, I need to tell you something, and I need you to really listen to me. I explained everything, starting with the stranger at my door and ending with my conversations with her siblings. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long, I thought she had hung up. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Have you been feeling confused lately? Forgetting things more than usual? Why does everyone keep asking me that? Because Trevor called me last week. He said you've been acting strange, making poor decisions, and he was worried about your mental state. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Trevor had been poisoning my children against me, preparing them for this moment when I would sound confused and emotional about losing my home. Jennifer, I'm not confused. I'm angry. There's a difference. But, Mom, if Trevor had power of attorney and he thought this was best, stop. I couldn't listen to another child explain why my son had the right to destroy my life. Just stop. I hung up and turned off my phone. For the first time in my adult life, I had no one to call, no one who would listen to me, no one who believed that I was capable of making my own decisions. That afternoon, I drove into town to see my longtime neighbor and friend, Betty Morrison. We had known each other for 30 years, raised our children together, supported each other through divorces, deaths, and countless crises. Grace, what a surprise. Come in, come in. You look terrible, honey. I sat at her kitchen table, where we had shared coffee and gossip for decades, and told her everything. Betty listened without interrupting, her face growing more horrified with each detail. That's the most awful thing I've ever heard. What are you going to do? I don't know. My own children think Trevor did the right thing. They think I'm too old and confused to live on my own. Betty shook her head. Grace, you're one of the sharpest women I know. You've been running that ranch better than most men could. Your kids are idiots if they can't see that. It was the first validation I had received in 2 days, and it made me cry harder than I had since Robert's funeral. But what can I do? He had legal authority. The sale is already done. Betty leaned forward, her eyes fierce. Honey, legal and right aren't always the same thing. You need to fight this. That evening, I sat on my porch one more time, watching the sunset over land that would soon belong to strangers. My phone had been buzzing all day with calls from my children, but I didn't answer. They had made it clear whose side they were on. Trevor had been smart about this. He had spent months, maybe years, building a case against my competency. He had paid bills without telling me, then used those payments as evidence that I was failing. He had convinced my other children that I was declining mentally, so when I protested the sale, I would sound exactly like a confused, elderly woman having a breakdown. But I wasn't confused, and I wasn't giving up. Tomorrow, I would find a lawyer and fight this with everything I had. Because even if my children had abandoned me, I still had fight left in me. The question was whether I had enough time to save my home before Friday, when strangers would come to claim everything I had built. The law office of Harrison and Associates sat on Main Street in a building that had seen better days. But attorney Michael Harrison came highly recommended by Betty's nephew, who worked in real estate. At 7 in the morning, I was already sitting in the parking lot, waiting for them to open. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours, spending the night gathering every document I could find related to the ranch and the power of attorney Trevor had convinced me to sign. Michael Harrison was younger than I expected, maybe 45, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. When I explained my situation, his expression grew increasingly troubled. "Mrs. Whitmore, this is quite serious. Let me review these documents." He spread the papers across his desk, taking notes as he read. The power of attorney was more comprehensive than I remembered, but there were limitations that Trevor had clearly ignored. "Your son definitely overstepped his authority here," Michael said after 20 minutes. "A power of attorney for health care and limited financial decisions doesn't give him the right to sell your primary residence without your explicit consent." Relief flooded through me. "So you can stop this?" "I can try, but there are complications. The sale has already been completed. The new owners are innocent parties who purchased the property in good faith. Reversing this will require proving fraud, and that's not simple. What do I need to do?" "First, we file an emergency injunction to prevent you from being evicted on Friday. Then, we begin building a case for fraud and abuse of power of attorney. But Mrs. Whitmore, I need to be honest with you. This will be expensive and time-consuming, and your son likely has resources to fight back." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang. Trevor's name appeared on the screen. "Answer it," Michael advised, "but put it on speaker. I want to hear what he says." "Mom, finally. I've been trying to reach you all night. I was busy consulting with my attorney." The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. When Trevor spoke again, his voice had lost its casual confidence. "Mom, you don't need an attorney. This is a family matter. Selling someone's home without their permission isn't a family matter, Trevor. It's fraud." I had power of attorney. Everything I did was legal. Michael gestured for me to keep talking. "We'll see about that. My lawyer seems to think differently." "Mom, listen to me. You're making a mistake. Lawyers are expensive. By the time this is over, you'll have spent more money than you'll ever recover. Take the $10,000 I gave you, find a nice apartment, and let this go." "No." Mom." I said, "No, Trevor, I'm fighting this." After I hung up, Michael looked grim. "He's going to make this difficult. I suspect he's already talking to his own attorneys." Over the next 3 days, my suspicions proved correct. Michael filed the emergency injunction, but Trevor's legal team responded immediately with their own motions. They painted me as an elderly woman in declining mental health who was being manipulated by an opportunistic lawyer. Worse, Trevor began systematically cutting off my access to money. The joint bank accounts I shared with him for ranch business were suddenly frozen. My credit cards, which I discovered were actually in his name as an authorized user, were canceled. The cell phone plan was terminated. On Wednesday evening, I sat in my house with no phone service, limited cash, and a growing sense of desperation. The electricity had been shut off earlier that day. Trevor claimed he had been paying the utilities as part of helping me, and since I was no longer cooperative, those services were discontinued. Betty brought me a flashlight and a thermos of hot coffee, staying with me until late into the evening. "Grace, this is criminal what he's doing to you. He's trying to make me look unstable for the court. If I show up tomorrow looking like a homeless person, it supports his narrative that I can't take care of myself. Stay at my house tonight." "I can't abandon my home, Betty. If I leave, even for one night, Trevor will use it as evidence that I've already moved on." That night, I slept on my couch, wrapped in every blanket I could find, listening to the sounds of my empty house. 40 years of memories surrounded me in the darkness. The kitchen where I had taught my children to cook. The living room where we had opened Christmas presents. the master bedroom where Robert and I had planned our future together. Thursday morning brought a new crisis. A sheriff's deputy knocked on my door with an eviction notice. Trevor had convinced a judge that I was trespassing on property that no longer belonged to me. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but you need to vacate the premises by 6 o'clock this evening." I called Michael Harrison from Betty's house, my hands shaking as I dialed. "Grace, I got the emergency injunction, but it's temporary. We have a hearing tomorrow morning. Can you stay somewhere else tonight? If I leave this house, Trevor wins. If you don't leave and get arrested for trespassing, Trevor definitely wins." That afternoon, I packed a suitcase with trembling hands. 40 years of marriage, of building a life, reduced to one bag of essentials. I walked through every room, touching furniture Robert and I had chosen together, looking at family photos that now seemed like evidence of a life that never really existed. Trevor arrived at 5:30 with a moving truck and 3 workers. He didn't look at me as I carried my suitcase to Betty's car. "Mom, this is for the best, you'll see." I turned to face my youngest son, the boy I had nursed through pneumonia and cheered for at every Little League game. "Trevor, when you were 8 years old, you broke Mrs. Patterson's window with a baseball. Do you remember what I taught you?" He looked confused by the question. "No, Eurus. I taught you that when you hurt someone, you apologize and you make it right. You worked all summer doing chores to pay for that window." "Mom, this is different." "No, it's not. You've hurt me in a way that can't be fixed with chores or apologies, but you're going to pay for this window anyway." As Betty drove me away from my home, I watched Trevor directing the workers to load my furniture into the truck. Everything I owned was being cataloged and stored, as if my entire life was nothing more than inventory to be managed. That night, lying in Betty's guest room, I stared at the ceiling and made a promise to myself. Trevor thought he had won because he had money and lawyers and siblings who supported him. But he had underestimated one crucial factor. He had underestimated how much fight an angry mother could have when her child betrayed everything she had taught him about right and wrong. Tomorrow's hearing would determine whether I had any legal recourse, but win or lose, I was done being the victim in this story. Trevor wanted to treat me like a helpless old woman who needed to be managed. He was about to learn that I was still the same woman who had built a ranch from nothing, raised 4 children, and survived losing the love of my life. The question was whether the legal system would give me the tools I needed to fight back, or if I would have to find another way to get justice. The hearing didn't go as planned. Trevor's attorney, a sharp woman in an expensive suit, presented a compelling case. They had medical records showing my hospitalization 2 years ago, financial records indicating missed payments that Trevor had covered, and testimony from my own children about my allegedly declining mental state. When it was my turn to speak, I felt every one of my 60 years. Standing before the judge, I tried to explain that I was competent, that I had been managing the ranch successfully, that my son had manipulated me. But even to my own ears, I sounded like an angry old woman making excuses. The judge ruled that, while there were questions about the scope of Trevor's authority, the sale itself appeared to be legal based on the power of attorney documents. My injunction was denied. The new owners could take possession of the ranch. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt defeated in a way I hadn't experienced since Robert's death. Michael Harrison was apologetic, but realistic. "Grace, I'm sorry. We can continue to pursue this, but it's going to be an uphill battle. The system favors completed transactions, especially when there's documentation supporting the seller's authority." "What are my options?" "We can file a civil suit for damages, but that could take years and cost more money than you might recover. Honestly, your best bet might be to negotiate with Trevor for a fair settlement." That afternoon, Betty drove me to the storage unit where all my possessions had been placed. Row after row of boxes and furniture, my entire life reduced to a 10 by 12 concrete space. I sat on Robert's old recliner, surrounded by the detritus of 4 decades, and cried until I had no tears left. But as I was going through boxes looking for important documents, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a folder labeled "Ranch Business" in Trevor's handwriting, hidden behind some old photo albums. Inside were bank statements I had never seen before, account numbers I didn't recognize, loan documents with my forged signature. Trevor hadn't just sold my ranch, he had been stealing from me for years. My hands shook as I read through document after document. A line of credit taken out against the ranch for $200,000, a second mortgage I had never agreed to. Business accounts that showed money being transferred out regularly to accounts in Trevor's name. No wonder he had been so confident about having the legal authority to sell. He had been planning this for years, slowly taking control of every aspect of my finances while making it look like he was helping me. Betty found me an hour later, still sitting in the storage unit with papers spread around me like evidence of a crime. "Grace, what is all this?" "Proof that my son is a thief." I called Michael Harrison immediately. When he saw the documents, his entire demeanor changed. "Grace, this changes everything. This isn't just about power of attorney anymore. This is fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. We're talking about criminal charges. Can we get my ranch back? If we can prove these signatures are forged and that Trevor used fraudulent documents to inflate the property's debt, we might be able to void the sale. But we need handwriting experts, forensic accountants, maybe even FBI involvement, if the dollar amounts are high enough." The next week was a blur of activity. Michael brought in specialists who confirmed that multiple signatures on loan documents were forgeries. A forensic accountant traced the movement of money from my accounts to Trevor's personal and business accounts over the past 3 years. The total amount Trevor had stolen was staggering, over $800,000. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. While reviewing the loan applications Trevor had submitted in my name, the forensic accountant discovered something Trevor had overlooked. "Mrs. Whitmore, look at this application for the second mortgage. It's dated 6 months ago, but it lists you as a widow whose husband died in a car accident in 2019. I stared at the document. Robert died of cancer in 2018, and Trevor was with me at the hospital when it happened. This means your son deliberately lied on a legal document, providing false information to secure a loan against your property. That's felony fraud." Michael looked grim as he explained the implications. "Grace, Trevor didn't just sell your ranch impulsively. This was a carefully planned scheme that's been in motion for years. He's been systematically stealing from you and building a paper trail to justify eventually taking your property." The pieces began falling into place. Trevor's sudden interest in helping with ranch business after Robert died, his insistence on handling my banking and bills, the way he had convinced me to sign the power of attorney during my illness, even his campaign to convince my other children that I was declining mentally. It was all part of a long-term plan to steal my life's work. What happens now? Now we take this to the district attorney. This isn't just a civil matter anymore. Your son has committed multiple felonies. That night, I called Sarah and Marcus to tell them what we had discovered. I expected shock, denial, maybe even support. What I got was accusation. "Mom, you're being manipulated by this lawyer," Sarah said. "He's filling your head with conspiracy theories because he wants to file an expensive lawsuit." "Sarah, I'm looking at forged documents with your brother's handwriting. How do you know they're forged?" "Mom, you're not thinking clearly about this." Marcus was even worse. "Mom, Trevor would never steal from you. He's always been the most responsible one in the family. I think this lawyer is taking advantage of your emotional state." I hung up, realizing that Trevor's manipulation had been even more comprehensive than I had understood. He hadn't just stolen my money and my property. He had stolen my children's trust in me. But I wasn't the same broken woman who had lost her home 2 weeks ago. The evidence was overwhelming. Trevor had committed serious crimes, and no amount of family loyalty could change that fact. The next morning, Michael and I walked into the district attorney's office with boxes of evidence. Assistant District Attorney Patricia Vance was a woman about my age who listened intently as we laid out Trevor's crimes. "Mrs. Whitmore, this is one of the most sophisticated elder abuse cases I've seen. Your son has been committing fraud against you for years. Amiens. Can you prosecute him?" "We can and we will. But I need you to understand that this will be difficult for your family. When we arrest your son, it's going to be public. Your other children may blame you for putting their brother in prison. I thought about my grandchildren who would grow up knowing their uncle was a criminal. I thought about family gatherings that would never happen again, relationships that were already broken and would never heal. But then I thought about Robert, who had worked himself to exhaustion, building something he hoped would last for generations. I thought about all the elderly people who were being abused by their own children who had no one to fight for them. Do it, I said. File the charges. Patricia Vance nodded. We'll need a few days to prepare the case, but Mrs. Whitmore, I want you to know we're going to get your ranch back. As we left the district attorney's office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. Trevor thought he had won because he had money and lawyers and family support, but he had made one crucial mistake. He had underestimated the power of the truth. The call from Michael Harrison came on a Tuesday morning while I was having coffee with Betty, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy while my world continued to crumble around me. I had been staying in her guest room for 3 weeks now, living out of a suitcase like a refugee from my own life. Grace, we've made a breakthrough. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit has taken over the investigation. My coffee cup rattled against the saucer as I set it down. The FBI? The amount of money involved and the interstate banking issues have elevated this to a federal case. But that's not the biggest news. They've uncovered something that changes everything. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Michael's office across from Agent Lisa Rodriguez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who laid out a timeline that made my stomach turn. Mrs. Whitmore, your son's fraud is more extensive than we initially realized. He didn't just steal from you, he's been running a sophisticated scheme involving multiple elderly property owners. She spread photographs across the desk. We've identified at least 6 other victims, all widows or widowers in their 60s and 70s who trusted Trevor to help manage their affairs. I stared at the faces in the photos, recognizing 2 of them as women from my church, Mrs. Patterson and Mrs. Chen, but they moved to assisted living facilities last year because Trevor convinced them they couldn't afford to maintain their homes anymore. He used the same pattern with all of you, gained power of attorney under false pretenses, created financial emergencies by taking out loans against the properties, then pressured the owners to sell to cover the fabricated debts. The room spun around me. My son wasn't just a family betrayer, he was a predator who targeted vulnerable elderly people. How much money are we talking about? Over $12 million across all victims. Your ranch was the largest single theft, but Mrs. Patterson lost her family farm worth $3 million, and Mrs. Chen's downtown property was worth $2.8 million. Agent Rodriguez continued, the good news is that because this is now a federal case, we have more resources to recover your property. Trevor made the mistake of using interstate banks to hide the money, which gives us jurisdiction. What about my other children? Did they know? The agent exchanged a look with Michael before answering. We don't believe your other children were involved in the financial crimes, but there's evidence that Trevor's wife, Amanda, was a full partner in the scheme. Amanda. I had never particularly liked my daughter-in-law, finding her cold and calculating, but I had never imagined she was capable of this level of manipulation. What kind of evidence? Text messages, emails, bank records showing her accessing the fraudulent accounts. She was the one who researched your property values and identified you as targets. Trevor provided the family access and emotional manipulation, but Amanda was the mastermind. I felt sick, not just betrayed by my son, but violated by a woman I had welcomed into my family, who had sat at my dinner table and played with my grandchildren while planning to steal everything I owned. There's more, Agent Rodriguez said gently. We found recordings on Amanda's phone, conversations where she and Trevor discussed how to convince your other children that you were mentally declining. She played a snippet of audio that made my blood freeze. Amanda's voice. You need to plant more seeds with Sarah about your mom's memory problems. Make her think Grace is getting worse. Trevor's voice. I already told Marcus that Mom forgot to pay the insurance again. He's starting to believe she can't handle things. Amanda. Good. The more incompetent she seems, the easier it'll be to justify the sale. No one will question your authority if they think she's losing her mind. I gripped the arms of my chair, feeling physically ill. They had systematically destroyed my relationships with my own children, poisoning their minds against me as part of their theft scheme. "Mrs. Whitmore, are you okay?" Michael asked. I wasn't okay. I would never be okay. But I was angry, and anger was better than despair. "When are you arresting them?" "Tomorrow morning. We've coordinated with local law enforcement. They'll be taken into custody simultaneously, so neither can warn the other." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my grandchildren, Trevor and Amanda's twins, who were only 8 years old. They would wake up tomorrow to find their parents being arrested, their world shattered by choices they had no part in making. I called Sarah, needing to prepare her for what was coming, hoping that maybe now she would believe me. "Mom, please don't start with this again." "Sarah, the FBI is arresting Trevor tomorrow morning." The silence stretched so long, I thought she had hung up. "What are you talking about?" "He's been stealing from elderly people for years. There are at least 6 other victims. This isn't just about me anymore." "Mom, you're scaring me. The FBI? That's impossible. It's happening tomorrow at 9 a.m. I wanted you to hear it from me first. I need to call Trevor. I need to warn him." "Sarah, if you warn him, you'll be obstructing a federal investigation." After I hung up, I sat in Betty's kitchen and wondered if I would lose all of my children over this. Sarah and Marcus still believed Trevor was the victim of an overzealous lawyer and a confused mother. When he was arrested, would they blame me for destroying their brother's life? The next morning, Betty and I sat in her living room watching the local news. At 9:15, the story broke. Local marketing executive Trevor Whitmore was arrested this morning on federal charges of elder abuse, fraud, and embezzlement. FBI agents also arrested his wife, Amanda Whitmore, in connection with what prosecutors are calling a sophisticated scheme that targeted elderly property owners. The reporters stood outside Trevor's upscale home in Dallas as agents carried out boxes of evidence. The alleged scheme is believed to have defrauded victims of over $12 million in property and assets. My phone started ringing immediately. Sarah crying hysterically, Marcus demanding to know what I had done, Jennifer calling from California in shock. But the call that broke my heart came from my grandson, Trevor's 8-year-old son Jake. "Grandma Grace, my dad is in jail. Can you come get us?" I drove to Dallas that afternoon, my hands shaking as I navigated the familiar route to Trevor's house. Police cars still lined the street and neighbors stood in their yards, whispering and pointing. Inside the house, Amanda's mother was packing suitcases for the twins while they sat on the couch looking shell-shocked and confused. "Grandma, why did the police take Mommy and Daddy?" Jake asked, climbing into my lap. I held my grandson close, breathing in his little boy scent of grass stains and bubble gum, and wondered how to explain that his parents were criminals without destroying his innocence entirely. "They made some bad choices, sweetheart. Sometimes when grown-ups make bad choices, they have to go away for a while to think about what they did." "Did they steal something?" Out of the mouths of babes. "Yes, honey, they took things that didn't belong to them." "From you?" I closed my eyes, holding him tighter. "From me and from other people too." That night, I lay in Betty's guest room thinking about the recordings Agent Rodriguez had played. Amanda and Trevor discussing me like I was a mark in a con game, planning my destruction with the same casual attention they might give to planning a vacation. But they had made one crucial error. They had assumed that a 60-year-old widow would be easy to break, that I would accept their manipulation and disappear quietly into whatever small life they had planned for me. They had forgotten that I was Robert Whitmore's wife, the woman who had stood beside him as we built something from nothing, the mother who had raised 4 children while working a ranch, the survivor who had buried the love of her life and kept going. Tomorrow, Agent Rodriguez would call with news about recovering my property. The wheels of justice were finally turning, and Trevor and Amanda would pay for their crimes. But tonight, all I could think about was that little boy asking if his parents had stolen from me, and how their choices had damaged so many innocent lives in pursuit of money they hadn't earned and didn't deserve. The call from my lawyer came at exactly 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, 6 weeks after Trevor's arrest. I was sitting on Betty's back porch watching the sunrise and drinking coffee from the mug Robert had given me for our 20th wedding anniversary, one of the few personal items I had managed to retrieve from storage. "Grace, it's over. The judge has voided the sale. Your ranch is being returned to you." I set down my coffee cup with trembling hands. After 2 months of legal battles, FBI investigations, and family destruction, those simple words felt impossible to believe. What happens now? The current owners will be compensated through the Federal Asset Forfeiture Fund. They're actually relieved. They never felt right about the circumstances of the purchase anyway. You can move back home as early as this weekend. Home. The word felt foreign after living in limbo for so long. "What about Trevor and Amanda?" Michael's voice grew somber. "Trevor pleaded guilty to avoid a longer sentence. He'll serve 8 to 12 years in federal prison. Amanda got 6 to 10 years. They've been ordered to pay full restitution to all victims, though most of the money has already been recovered through seized assets. 8 to 12 years. My son would be in his late 40s when he was released, his children nearly grown. The life he had built through theft and manipulation was gone, replaced by prison uniforms and visiting rooms. Grace, there's something else. The other victims want to meet with you. Mrs. Patterson especially has been asking about you." That afternoon, I found myself in the community center conference room facing 5 other women who had been victimized by my son. Mrs. Patterson, whom I had known for 30 years, looked older and more frail than when I had last seen her. "Grace, I owe you an apology," she said, tears in her eyes. "I thought you were just being stubborn about selling your ranch. I had no idea Trevor was doing to you what he did to me." Mrs. Chen, whose property downtown had been worth nearly $3 million, spoke next. "Your son was very convincing. He made me believe my children thought I was becoming a burden. One by one, they told their stories. The pattern was always the same. Trevor gaining their trust, creating financial crises, then presenting himself as the solution while systematically stealing everything they owned." "How did he choose us?" asked Mrs. Rodriguez, a 72-year-old widow whose cattle ranch had been taken. Agent Rodriguez said Amanda researched property records looking for elderly owners with substantial assets and no obvious family protection, I explained. "We were all widows or widowers with children who lived far away or were too busy to pay close attention to our finances." The room fell silent as we absorbed the calculated nature of our victimization. "What matters now," said Mrs. Patterson, "is that we got our properties back and he can't hurt anyone else." 3 days later, I stood in the driveway of my ranch for the first time in 2 months. The new owners had maintained the property beautifully, even improving some of the fencing and repainting the barn. It looked exactly as it had the morning Trevor destroyed my life, as if the nightmare had never happened. But everything had changed, even if the landscape looked the same. I walked through my house slowly, touching familiar furniture that felt like artifacts from a previous life. The kitchen where I had made thousands of meals for my family. The living room where we had celebrated birthdays and holidays. The master bedroom where Robert and I had planned our future together. My phone rang as I stood in Robert's study, looking at the desk where he had managed our finances with such careful attention to detail. "Mom?" It was Sarah, her voice hesitant. "Hello, Sarah. I heard about the judge's ruling. I'm glad you got your ranch back." I waited, knowing there was more she needed to say. "Mom, I owe you an apology. Marcus and I were wrong. We should have listened to you, instead of believing Trevor's lies about your mental state. You believed your brother because you loved him. That's not something to apologize for. But we should have trusted you. We should have known you wouldn't make up something like this." I sat down at Robert's desk, running my fingers over the wood grain he had polished smooth over decades of use. "Sarah, Trevor spent years convincing you that I was declining. He was very good at manipulation. Are you ever going to forgive us?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had burned down everything familiar. Could I forgive my children for believing I was incompetent? Could I forgive them for abandoning me when I needed them most? "I'm working on it," I said honestly. "But trust has to be rebuilt, not just given." Over the following weeks, Sarah and Marcus made efforts to reconnect. They called regularly, visited occasionally, and tried to rebuild the relationship their brother had systematically destroyed. Jennifer flew in from California with her family, and for the first time in years, we had a conversation that didn't feel strained or artificial. But some relationships couldn't be repaired. Trevor's children, my grandchildren, were living with Amanda's parents in another state. The courts had deemed me an inappropriate guardian because of my involvement in their parents' imprisonment. I sent birthday cards and Christmas presents, but I doubted I would see them again until they were adults. The hardest part was the silence where Trevor used to be. Despite everything he had done, he was still my son. I had raised him, loved him, believed in him. The man who had stolen my life was the same boy I had rocked to sleep and cheered for at school plays. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset paint the hills gold and orange, Betty brought over a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "How are you really doing, Grace?" I considered the question carefully. "I'm angry. I'm sad. I'm grateful. I'm confused. Sometimes, all at the same time." "That sounds about right for someone who's been through what you have." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the cattle move slowly across the pasture. This land had been in my family for 4 decades. My children had learned to ride horses here, had their first jobs here, had built memories here. Now it felt like a museum of a family that no longer existed. "Do you regret fighting back?" Betty asked. "No. If I hadn't, Trevor would have moved on to more victims. Mrs. Patterson might have lost her farm. Mrs. Chen might have ended up homeless. Sometimes doing the right thing costs more than doing nothing, but that doesn't make it wrong." 3 months after Trevor's sentencing, I received a letter from him in prison. My hands shook as I read his attempts to justify his actions, his claims that he had been trying to protect me from myself, his requests for money for his commissary account. I read it twice, then burned it in the fireplace Robert had built with his own hands. There would be no reconciliation, no forgiveness, no restoration of our relationship. Trevor had made his choices, and I had made mine. The son I had loved was gone, replaced by a stranger who saw me as nothing more than a source of money to be exploited. But sitting in my living room, surrounded by 40 years of memories and hard-won peace, I realized something important. Trevor had stolen my money, my property, and 2 months of my life, but he hadn't stolen my strength, my dignity, or my ability to start over. At 60 years old, I was alone on my ranch for the first time since Robert's death. But I wasn't the same broken woman who had been devastated by betrayal. I was a survivor who had fought the system, exposed the truth, and reclaimed her life. Outside my window, the sun was setting over land that was mine again, earned through decades of work and defended through months of battle. Tomorrow I would wake up in my own bed, make coffee in my own kitchen, and walk land that belonged to me not because someone had given it to me, but because I had refused to let anyone take it away. That was enough. That was everything.